Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I am going to talk about something that unfortunately impacts many people, which is the decision whether to cut off contact with a family member. And this comes up for a lot of people in counseling as well as for readers of my blog. And so I'm going to dive into that. But before I do, make sure that you click on subscribe so then you get access to all my bonus content. The one after this may be up to being a paid episode. So we shall see. And when I know what that is, I will include it in the description for this one so that you know what you would be paying to get, in addition to, of course, the 19 other ones that are all awesome about and that are subscriber only. Obviously, oral sex on women, maintenance sex, I've mentioned this a bunch, and some others. So let's dive right into why somebody would consider cutting off contact from a family member. Well, I mean, there's many reasons. I cover some of them on my blog with various guest posts of people who have done this, and people asking about what really the criteria are to make you want to do this because they're considering it for themselves, for their own peace of mind. So the different sorts of issues that lead to this usually include things like a parent was an alcoholic or had other mental health issues such as borderline personality, narcissistic personality disorder that made your childhood really difficult, and it's then difficult for you to forgive them for what happened to you. So that's one thing, is it's hard to forgive them for the past, but then also, even if you can move forward, whether you forgive or not, whether you decide, forgiveness is not essential in all relationships based on the type of relationship. I could get into that later. But then it's also that the person keeps doing these sorts of things. So it's not just, for example, that your mother used to be an alcoholic. She was all over the place. She never remembered anything. She screamed at you. She fell asleep constantly in front of, the TV from 6 o'clock on, and you kind of were raising yourself and your siblings or whatever the case may be. But also now she will text you crazy stuff when she's drunk at, same time of day, and she has had crying fits, and she, a big one is she doesn't remember or validate what happened in your upbringing. She says that, yeah, she struggled, but it was all due to your dad who left, or because you were a bad kid then, or whatever the case may be. So usually nobody wants to be cut off from a family member. Like, this is not like a happy decision, obviously. It's extremely fraught and extremely upsetting. People want to have a happy family. People want to be normal, to be like the families that they see, many of their friends have, etc. And they're deeply envious of those situations. So nobody takes this decision lightly, but often you're deciding between your own mental health and the mental health of it's like, can you function while you still have this person in your life? And for some people, the answer is no. And they keep trying and trying to get along with this person, and it doesn't work. And it usually doesn't work for two reasons. First of all, the person themselves, they can be very difficult. They don't only have problems with you. Like if you look through their life, there's many other people who have cut them off, such as friendships that end, work relationships, romantic relationships, etc. But also you change. Frequently people go to therapy and or they have their own kids. Those are like two big transitions that make you feel like you have changed to a point that you no longer want to put up with this stuff, and you don't think that you have to anymore. So whereas before you had kids, for example, you may have thought, well, this is my mother. I have to love my mother. I have to see my mother because where would my mother be without me? And, stuff was really hard for her. Then frequently, especially for women, when they have their own children, they become very, very triggered in a very different way by their mother. For women, it's usually by their mother, because they think, oh my God, I am trying to be the best parent I can be every day, and I am protecting my child at all costs from everything. And why didn't this happen happened to me. I feel so sad that, and then this also manifests as anger. I feel so sad and angry that my parent was not able to do this for me, and now I see it in a whole different way since becoming a mother myself. This is a really classic time for especially women to have a lot of anger toward their mothers. Women identify more with their mothers because they compare their own parenting experience, which of course when you have a baby is a very different parenting experience, which I could talk about, but they compare that to what they experienced themselves. And then it seems even more lacking in different ways, and it just hits them a lot more dramatically and differently as the comparisons, right? So this isn't always a good comparison. Now, if you are, for example, a woman with emotional support and financial support who is raising one baby in relative, comfort, and your mother was a single mother and she didn't have any help, and she didn't have money, and then she's acted like an asshole a lot. Obviously, the comparison is not valid, and always try to do your best to empathize with your parents' situation, but still you may feel that your parent hurt you in ways that they never really recognize later. So it's interesting. A lot of people, especially with therapy, can get to a place where they understand their parents. They really do understand them. And especially when they're sitting with me, they can really get it. But then it's when they talk to their damn parent that everything goes out the window, because they'll have so much understanding. We're talking about it. Imagine what it was like to be your mother. Well, yeah, I guess I never thought about it like that. It was really difficult. I can see why she would have turned to drinking, or why she would have dated these men, or whatever. Then they go and tell their mother, I'm really trying to work through all of my feelings about my upbringing, and I'm just hoping things can be different between us. And then the mother's like, what do you mean? I did the best that I could. In fact, I did pretty good. I did a lot better than, for example, your father did. He was a real shit parent. Well, then, things really derail from there, because your parent will not validate your feelings, and then it feels like all your work trying to understand them is for naught. It's not for naught. It really helps you make peace with your childhood. But if you're still dealing with a conflictual person that refuses to recognize anything they ever do wrong, many people at this point decide that this stress is really not worth it. So at this point, people are really usually deciding between, should my parent have a relationship with my kids or not? And I probably... I think I did a podcast about this, maybe not. I know I have an upcoming post about it. The grandparents really do not mess up the kids in the way that people think, because I've mentioned this before in passing on these podcasts, I believe, but, your grandparents just like wacky. Just like some wacky dude or woman, and like they say some weird stuff. But what the point is, the kids don't come into therapy talking about the grandparents unless the grandparents were horrifically abusive and you were with them all the time. But just hanging out with some like weirdo who yells at you not to touch the sofa is not going to traumatize any kid. Any kid that isn't that person's kid. Your kid's experience is not like your experience. They are so far removed from it. They may have some crazy grandparents. And in a best case, they don't even feel like they have crazy grandparents. They like it. They think, all right, grandma's weird about the sofa, but she bakes good cookies, right? So that would be, this should never really be your reason, unless the person, again, is horrible to your children in a way that your children are scared of, which would be so unusual. But the point is it worth it for you to give your parents and your children a relationship with one another if your stomach is twisted and your heart rate is beating at 180 beats per minute during these encounters because of your issues with your parent? That is the decision that a lot of people have to make. And there are different ways to decide this. There are different ways to titrate your exposure to your parents. But if it gets to a point where you are having constant conflict with a parent, where you are in therapy to see what you could do on your end to make this better, to understand where they're coming from, etc., but they are just unmitigated, difficult constantly, then this is a point at which many people wonder if they should cut off contact. There are different ways and levels of cutting off contact too. You could still, for example, even see a parent once a year, but then just not talk to them otherwise. Never text with them, for example. Some people never text with a parent past a certain time at night because that's when the parent gets drunk or gets maudlin or angry. Some people have their spouse come in as a buffer between them and their parents. So there are many different ways to skin a cat here. Nobody goes into this decision without a lot of back and forth because it feels so sad and it induces so much guilt to decide to cut off a parent. The parents, I work frequently with parents whose adult children have gone no contact, and this is getting more and more common because people are more aware of things that are, not emotionally healthy. And so they want to put up more boundaries. It didn't used to be, for example, 100 years ago, if your mother was crazy, she was just crazy. Some people moved across the country and never dealt with it, but most people just said, all right, my mom's crazy, I got to put up with it. And if I hate my life when I'm with her, then that's just is what it is. People don't say that as much anymore because there's a lot more understanding about what is emotionally healthy and what's not. So a lot more people are choosing or considering going no contact or low contact with parents who they feel were, very much hurt them and continue to do so. And when I work with these parents, frequently the majority of our work is on understanding and empathizing with their adult children's perspective, which of course they're ahead of the game if they're willing to come into therapy or family therapy. Many parents will not even consider this because subconsciously they know that they're going to catch some shit, and they actually think that they're going to catch more shit than they do because of course a therapist's goal is not to make anybody feel bad but to repair a relationship. But for example, and continuing to use this example of the alcoholic mother, she knows she fucked up. So she doesn't want some therapist being like, wait, you did what? And like, you didn't come to what of their events? And you let them cook at what age? And like, you were, so that's kind of what the adult the parent would fear, is that therapy would become this shaming exercise where they have to come into contact with all these ways that they failed their child, and they like won't be able to deal with it because subconsciously they're already so ashamed of it that they just fear that it will just completely destroy them to be held up, for these things to be held up in the harsh light of day. And adult children don't really recognize the amount of subconscious shame that these parents are experiencing usually because the parent does not admit it, because the parent is ashamed. So it's like this cycle, right? It's this circle. Because the parent is so ashamed, they can't admit to that they did anything wrong. And because they can't admit to that they did anything wrong, then the child increasingly believes that the parent is not ashamed. And really, it is the shame that is making the parent act in this detached or minimizing or dismissive way. So this is kind of a sad situation, obviously, and some people can get into therapy, family therapy or individual, but some parents just cannot go that far. And some adult children can't go that far. Some are just like, no, things were too bad, and I just cannot open myself up to being further hurt. I fear that my parent will again not understand me and that things will go to shit again. Of course, it doesn't always have to be parents. This can be siblings. Siblings can harm you and hurt you very much. And it could be, aunts, uncles, cousins, anybody, And the main issue here is, can you be the person that you want to be when you maintain contact with this family member? Or is it so aversive and so upsetting to you that you cannot parent, that you go to bed with a migraine the day after, that you're anxious the entire month before you're going to see them, that every time your phone pings, you have a lurch in your stomach because it may be this person? In that case, you should go to therapy for these things to work on what is obviously a trauma response, a PTSD response, but also perhaps during the time of the therapy and or afterwards, it is good to minimize contact, and because you obviously cannot deal with it, and you're not being the best parent, partner, worker, or person that you can be because you're continuing to put yourself into harm's way by dealing with this person that is causing this trauma response in you. So frequently when people are going through therapy that's focused on their family of origin, they instinctively limit contact because we are talking about a lot of sensitive topics in therapy, trying to work through them. And when we're working through them, they're like more active and they're more present in the foreground of the person's mind, whereas usually they try to bury it with really no success because it keeps coming up in various ways. As I discuss, unresolved childhood trauma and unresolved childhood issues of all sorts can lead to reenactment of these same patterns in your intimate relationships and, of course, in your parenting. So, for example, the less that you are able to directly look at and thereby process and grieve your sad and basically absent relationship with your own mother, the more your own mothering is going to be impacted by this. Certain activities are going to trigger you, things that make you think that you're like your mother or that your kid is like your mother. By the way, that's frequent when things are unresolved, is you constantly project that your child is more like your parent than you would like. And this is because it's almost like the only way you know how to interact with a parent is in this dysfunctional way. So you know how to be you. So it's like, then who's left? Your parent. So then you see your parent more in your child's personality than they really are, especially if there's any overlap at all. So like if you're an introvert, but your mother, who is also an alcoholic narcissist, was an extrovert, and then you have a daughter who's an extrovert, well, shit, that is going to bring some stuff up for you. And you may start conflating not only the extroversion, which may in fact be even genetically due to your mom, but also you may start to think of your daughter as more self-centered than she really is. And this may trigger you to act in ways that are similar to how you act with your mom. Now, if you can work through and process some of this stuff in therapy via reading books, listening to podcasts, etc., and work through some of this stuff, potentially while you even take a break from your parent that is triggering you so much, then you can really see what is it in your daughter that is like your mother, what isn't, what are you projecting, what are you not, how are you acting, are you acting in certain ways that are eliciting a more self-centered response in your kid. I talk about this a lot in the podcast and the post, Don't Let Your Kids Treat You Like Garbage, or guess what happens if you let your kids treat you like garbage. I talk about how if you were parented by a self-centered parent, then you just learn how to enable self-centered behavior, and you start doing this with your kids, thereby making them more self-centered than they would otherwise be, because you lay down and like almost invite them to walk all over you, as that was a response style that you learned to adapt in your family of origin. So there are many, many ways to work through childhood issues in treatment, but sometimes you get to a place where if you continue to put yourself actively in a situation with somebody who refuses to understand what they did and continues to act in the same ways. I mean, sometimes even if your parent cannot admit what they did, you can still move on as long as they act different. So you could have a conversation with your mother and she could say the stuff I said before, well, it isn't my fault because this, that, and this, and you act like I'm worse than I am, and actually you were a happy kid, and all this invalidating shit. But then the next time you meet up with her, she may be like, oh, and how's work going? Like, she never asked you a question about yourself and your life, and all of a sudden, look who's interested. Because she can't lose face by telling you you're right about anything, but she doesn't want to lose the relationship. So then moving forward, you will notice a difference in how she was acting. So usually, as I said, people really do not want to be estranged from their family. Like, this is nobody's victory, Like, this is a very difficult, upsetting situation, and people don't want to do it. So therefore, if even a parent does not admit what they did, but then they change moving forward, and some very evolved people can even do it if the parent is like a great-grandparent. Then, not a great-grandparent like great-grandmother, but like a excellent grandparent, they can find some healing in that, although it is always laced with a little bit of resentment, like, what the hell? Why can you be some ace grandma and you were like a real shitty mom? That's no fair. But, that's a totally normal feeling. But many people can kind of swallow that and move forward and actually feel positive about the relationship between their parent and their child. Like, well, at least something good came out of my mother after all. And also, by the way, if you are in a situation where you've ever considered estrangement, never feel bad. Like, I have a post about like when you feel relief at the idea of a parent dying. Like, usually this is like a massively shameful idea. People only feel that's a crazy idea if they've never been in an emotionally neglectful or abusive situation with a difficult person who struggles with mental health issues. If they have been in that situation, then they know exactly what you're talking about. If you feel like, oh my God, if my parent just died, painlessly somehow, my life would be so much easier. And that's a totally normal feeling for somebody to have who had an extremely difficult upbringing, and especially also amplified by a continued difficult relationship with the parent in adulthood. So don't shame yourself for having those sorts of feelings, which can otherwise be thought of as taboo. And I have lots of recommended reading on books about struggling with difficult parents, and I could link you to some of those as well. So anyhow, if you're considering this decision of estrangement, you really just have to think about, am I able to be a healthy person while I'm interacting with this person? And if not, maybe I could try therapy. Maybe I could get there one day, or maybe I could consider going low contact or no contact. And these are difficult things to struggle with, but there are many, many people in this situation. It doesn't feel like that when you're looking at everybody's happy social media posts, but it is. Trust me, therapists deal with this all the time with their clients. Clients come in with extremely difficult relationships with their family of origin. So hopefully this episode helped you a little bit to think about your situation and to cut yourself some slack, if nothing else, or to normalize your experience. And I will link you to those things that I discussed. And please do subscribe if my podcast is adding value to your life in any way. And I will have another one coming out that's paid soon. And I hope everybody has a great day.